Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday. Let's see. The first thing we'll do is welcome to everybody who is new. We use headphones at the end. We listen to a soundtrack. I give that soundtrack away for free. I give you an address. Here's the address. We're using a combination of brainwave entrainment and group mind linking of everybody listening to the same soundtrack at the same time to cause a global mind link where our consciousness is scientifically aligned together for a purpose. And the purpose is to change the quantum field and shift the way reality is manifesting itself. Nothing small here, right? Here's where you can go to ask a question or to make a comment about anything we discuss here. scientificsounds.com/ask-a-question. Here's where you can go to see all the live streams I've done since last year. And if you're new, start poking away at the old ones because each of these builds on information from the ones before. And so I'm constantly making reference to things, and today will be no exception to that. So I will make mention and a sort of a brief up-to-speed context. But you want the whole story about various elements that I talk about in these live streams. The past live streams flesh it out in great detail, and in some cases the whole live stream is about one element that I mention, like say today. Today is, we're talking about entanglement, and I have very specific views about entanglement. This idea is spooky action at a distance. The great physics debate between Niels Bohr and Einstein about new information about the quantum field, where we were seeing all these bizarre things in the rules of quantum mechanics, and in particular, when two atoms come together, they somehow link at some other dimensional state, and no matter where they are separated from that point on, they're entangled together. That whatever one is doing, whatever spin ratio one has, the other one has the exact opposite spin ratio to that. Always precisely and exactly opposite. If it tilts to the right, the other one tilts to the left. If it tilts up, the other one tilts down. If it rotates clockwise, the other one rotates counterclockwise at exactly the same speed precisely in synchronicity outside of time. So the big thing is that you can have two atoms that are separated by the whole universe of hundreds of millions of light years, and their spins and their rotations and whatever else they're doing will be precisely and exactly the opposite outside of time, faster than the speed of light, which of course was breaking the rules of set forth by E equals mc squared with Einstein, that light had a speed limit. 186,000 miles per second. Nothing can go faster than that. And I explained once before, I think maybe just the last live stream, that the reason for that is because energy, matter equal the same thing. E equals m. And the c squared is how much energy would have to coalesce to form the smallest particle of matter, an atom, and then accelerate that particle to the speed of light times itself, c squared. That's a huge, unimaginable amount of energy. And as the particle is accelerating, and more force is constantly being used for an ever-increasing acceleration, at 95% of the speed of light, the particle that's being pushed is getting larger, requiring a large amount of energy, which is making the particle larger, because they're both the same thing. E equals m, and it's an illusion that there's energy and a particle as two separate things. But it all starts to break apart at 95% of the speed of light, so that the particle is getting larger and larger and larger because the energy that's requiring it to push it is getting larger and larger, and they're two the same thing. And at the speed of light, they cancel out at infinity. It's an infinitely large particle being pushed by an infinitely large amount of energy. And that's why Einstein said that you can't go faster than the speed of light, because at that point it's infinite. Spooky action breaks that. Spooky action happens faster than the speed of light, which means that once again we're back to the ancient texts, the Sutras of Patanjali I keep harping on, and the Vedas talk about this exactly, because in the present moment, which is infinite, where the speed of light cancels out, we're outside of time. And in that domain, light ceases to exist. It exists and doesn't exist at the same time, like Schrodinger's cat in the box, where it's a living cat, dead cat. It's infinite and it's finite at the same time. It's now outside of time, and there's light and there's not light. It all cancels itself out. And in the midst of that, everything is one. Time and space no longer exist. It's all together as one thing again. And therefore, the idea that these two little particles stretched by hundreds of billions of light years away is doesn't matter anymore. It makes no more sense anymore, because there is no distance. Space is an illusion. Time is an illusion. The fact that they're separated by 100 million light years means nothing, because there is no 100 million light years. It's all here, it's all now, and it's all one thing. So really underlying all of that spooky action and distance is this idea of oneness in a state of resonance, which obeys all the laws that we see in music theory, harmonics and overtones and nested frequencies and standing waves and kind of stuff we see at the core of the quantum field. I suggest that for today you fasten your seatbelts, because all kinds of new crazy things have been coming through my news feed, and the universe is just sort of blowing all the doors off the hinges in my life. I can't even begin to tell you the things that are happening for me now. And I'm seeing that all around me. It's its own entanglement. It's its own synchronicity set. And that leads me to suspect I can make a reliable prediction just from deductive reasoning that the same sort of phenomenon must be happening in all of your lives as well. Because when we bring our consciousness together in these mind links that we've been doing, we are entangling ourselves together at a quantum field. All of us who belong to this group are forever entangled together. Whatever is happening in one of our lives is happening in everyone's life in miniature, or in some way it's being influenced. So whoever is at the peak of their doors being blown off their hinges is affecting all those people who haven't quite got to that part in their life yet, and it helps accelerate it in your life. So be prepared to have the craziest synchronicities and craziest things start to happen in your life, which is why we're doing all of this. And when you look in the news and you look at what's happening, and you look past the news as entertainment to spike your fears or spike your outrage, get past that and look at the good stuff that's happening in the world. It's mind-blowing what's going on. It's good stuff everywhere. All of it, from the standpoint of what we're talking about today, entanglement, I believe began here, 1665 with Christian Huygens. Now, for those of you who've been here with me the whole time, this will be familiar territory. This guy entered into a European contest to develop the most accurate timepiece in the world for ships navigating at sea, and he won the contest by inventing the pendulum clock. And when he was sick in bed, he noticed the two pendulum clocks had their pendulums in perfect swing with each other, which didn't make sense. So he took one clock off the wall, put it on another wall, and they became asynchronous, like they should be. Put them both back on the same wall, and they synchronize up in a couple of minutes and stay that way. This became the origin of the science of coupled oscillators. And it turns out coupled oscillators is the propensity of everything in the universe, animate and inanimate objects, to dance together, to synchronize up together. It's why strings vibrate sympathetically. When I play this note, other things sing out. Indian music is that way with the sitar. It's got 7 strings on the top and 13 strings underneath. 13 strings underneath are tuned to harmonic values of the strings on the top, and when I hit certain notes above, the ones underneath sing out all by themselves through sympathetic resonance. It's why a chord sounds good on a piano, because all of the different frequencies are mathematically related to each other, so that their standing waves fit together nicely mathematically and sound nice. Same mathematics we've used to design everything in the universe, including your own body and the proportions of your body, and your brain and your neurons. So the act of hearing music reiterates through subconscious pattern recognition so many unbelievable levels of things, of how consciousness is used to grow this universe based on the math that we see in music. That, of course, music is a super powerful method for tapping straight into the language of the unconscious mind and the emotions. But here in this article in Scientific American, 1993, coupled oscillators and biological synchronization, the idea that biological systems exhibit the finest degree of expression of this concept of using my body clocks to try to time myself to rhythms in the universe, in the world around me, to save energy, leads us to all kinds of different things that come about from this, where the idea of physical resonance, singing the right note to make the wine glass vibrate, is based on this same principle. The vibrations of my vocal cords using air molecules as a coupling agent forms a coupled oscillator pair with the glass in this shape, density, and mass. And if I tune the frequencies of my vocal cords to match the fundamental standing wave frequency of the glass in this atomic shape and density, it will cause this sympathetic resonance, coupled oscillator synchronicity between the two. And essentially, that is what I believe is the foundation behind spooky action at a distance. When things get entangled, they're really, the entanglement is a coupled oscillator phenomenon. They're causing each other to resonate. They want to resonate together because of this underlying law of coupled oscillators. It saves energy for them to resonate in exactly opposite patterns. Otherwise, the universe wouldn't be doing it. The universe is constantly looking for the path of least resistance to save energy, and by coupling together in these coupled oscillator networks that we call spooky action at a distance, where now we've got coupled oscillator networks outside of time and space, where it appears to be spooky because they're separated by large distances, but they seem to be somehow influencing each other in a continual resonance. I think it all comes together with coupled oscillators. Explanation is this: music. Same thing here with the Chladni plate and the sand resonating with different frequencies, forming these standing waves that look like lines, but they're not. If you look close enough, it's just dancing sound particles following the movement, the ripple patterns in the metal plate that makes the sound waves visible, or makes the standing waves visible. And I think that this is the same thing we see at the core of the quantum field, except it's not dancing sand particles. It's something that is too subtle to measure with our scientific instruments, so we call it a vacuum, which we know it's not. It's a substance. It behaves like a fluid, behaves like sound waves moving through water. And the standing waves that are forming fractal patterns that nest together perfectly, almost infinite number of standing wave patterns. And if you back far enough away from it, it looks like a proton, looks like a cell, looks like a person. To this guy, who, these are the only two pictures I could find of him on the whole internet. This is Gerald Oster, who touched off the whole industry of brain entrainment with binaural beats by publishing this research article in October 1973, Auditory Beats in the Brain, where he showed that you could entrain brain waves with an external sound pulse, and the earliest use of that would have been shamanic drumming. Pounding the drum at a brainwave speed causes my brainwaves to form a coupled oscillator pair with the drum beat and time my brainwaves to the same speed as the drum. So if the drum is pounding at a brain speed, my brain will change from where it is, travel to that speed, and lock on there. And that means I change your consciousness with a sound pulsing. He went on to another level of that, where he wanted to know if the brain would entrain to a phantom pulse. So he took two tones slightly out of tune and created what's called a binaural beat. Binaural, two sounds. And when they're out of tune just enough to create a beat speed that's a brain speed, your brain waves will entrain to that too. And if you do it with your headphones, it forces the right-left hemispheres to synchronize. And now that's a whole new order of accomplishment in the brain, because this state is a special state in the brain. It's when new original ideas come through. It's when the problem gets solved. It's when revelations take place. It's a highly desirable state. And now we can orchestrate that state scientifically using precisely tuned sound waves. And Gerald Oster is the guy who came up with this idea. Amazing, astounding, that formed a whole industry of using sound frequencies to affect consciousness itself by manipulating brainwave speeds through this coupled oscillator phenomenon and sympathetic resonance and entrainment. So now we've got this whole sort of industry. I'm involved in that industry. I've made innovations in that industry. Everybody else uses two out-of-tune sine waves. I don't use that. I created a new technique that I've patented called phase modulation binaural beats. I'm not using sine waves. I'm untuning the harmonics of the instrument sounds themselves, and the beat is arising inside the harmonics of the instrument itself and not as something separate. So everything you listen to, including the 3D nature sound recordings that might be through the headphones, I can manipulate nature sounds and bird chirps and water sounds and dolphins and build the binaural beats inside the harmonics of a dolphin voice or rain or music or musical instruments. We're essentially taking these two separate things and we are coupled oscillating them together and creating a coupled oscillator network in the brain tissue, in the neurons and the firing of those neurons to affect consciousness itself using sound frequencies. And that's essentially what we will be doing at the end of today, what we do every day, every one of these live streams. We're doing this thing with headphones and a soundtrack that is meant specifically to manipulate my state of consciousness to a core state and synchronize up my hemispheres so I'm in this sort of epiphany state, and link that with everybody's minds and brain waves so we're all exactly precisely in that same state together, where we form this massive mind link coupled oscillator network. And if the network gets big enough and the focus becomes pure enough, then we are in the quantum field, and we're in a position where we can change that quantum field through our intention. So we graduate from this idea of these coupled oscillator pairs to something called entanglement, which I think is the same rule of subatomic particles linked together in, outside of time and space. Atoms separated by 100 million light years, they're intimately linked together. And this harks back to, I spent a whole giant part of one episode talking about my friend and colleague at California Institute for Human Science, a fellow professor, Cleve Baxter here, father of lie detection. It's the Baxter technique that's used in lie detection. This is his lie detector machine with the chart recorders, and one of the many things that are measured is galvanic skin response. The electrical activity of your skin, the conductivity drops when you lie or are under stress. So he hooked it up to a plant leaf and noticed that if he harmed the plant would have a stress response on his lie detector machine. And technically that's not possible because it doesn't have a nervous system. It can't have a fight or flight response, but it's having one anyway. And the interesting thing was he noticed that once he had damaged the leaf, from that point on, the plant was able to read his intention of harm. So now all he had to do is reach for his knife and pull the blade out, and the plant would scream. It didn't even have to harm it physically anymore. His intention of harm was enough to make it freak out. That, to me, is an example of entanglement based on coupled oscillators. So as soon as he touches that leaf, they're entangled. The atoms are now entangled. And once he stresses the plant out, it's entering into a special state, and the entanglement deepens with emotion. Emotions accentuate the precision and the completeness of the entanglement. Then that became this book, The Secret Life of Plants, that became very famous, this idea of biocommunication, of my intention of harm will cause a response, that there's a new level of communication between living entities that we were not aware of before. And his further work, which is the years that I knew him, had to do with not plants but with people, and became a new book called The Secret Life of Your Cells, where he was taking scrapings from the inside of your cheek that have DNA and putting them in a saline solution and stressing the cells out with an electrical current, and you would have a stress response in another part of the building behind a closed door hooked up to the lie detector machine. The lie detector machine would fire off a stress response outside of time. In other words, when I stress the cell, no matter where you are in the world, you have an instantaneous response to that, right? So they separated them by hundreds of miles against the atomic clock in Cheyenne, Wyoming, accurate to 1 second in 10,000 years. And from at least that standpoint, it was simultaneous. It was outside of time. That is the definition of spooky action at a distance, by the way. Entangled. So for us, in the group that we're in, we are intentionally pushing this envelope of deepening the entanglement so that we can form a symbiotic mind, a group mind linked through the science of binaural beats, headphones, and entrainment. But we're maximizing this coupled oscillator network, which I think is a grand entanglement of consciousness, where we begin to affect the core quantum field through affecting the quantum field of each other in our consciousness itself, which I think is the core of the quantum field, which I think is what is at the core of the quantum field. When you break the smallest particle apart, there's nothing inside except energy pattern relationships in a standing wave, and what's vibrating, what's making that standing wave is consciousness itself, which we think is a vacuum. We think it's empty. It's not empty, it's something, and that something is the core of my true identity. The consciousness at the core of the quantum field, creating reality moment by moment. And the way the universe is set up is we have the ability to participate in that. We have the ability to participate in the creation of the universe because we are the universe. We are the instruments of the universe, seeing and tasting and touching and smelling itself. And the ideas that we have about what reality can be is the idea of the universe. The universe is constantly growing and evolving its idea of what it means to be alive and be the Godhead, or whatever you want to call it. So this idea of synchronicity and entanglement and coupled oscillators all swirls around itself. That when I start to couple oscillator with other people and I start to step onto the path that is here for me, designed by the universe itself, then the synchronicities begin to show up. My syncopated rhythm with other elements of the universe that are in harmonic resonance with me and my ideas begin to show up, begin to arrive. That's how I can bump into a stranger and have them be exactly the person I need to meet. When we begin to pay attention to when, where, why, how, we will begin to notice a pattern emerge, our spiritual energetic influence blueprint. Recognizing this pattern, we learn to discover, understand, and master the principles of the universe we interact with every day. If we knowingly step into this dance on purpose, then we can be the lead in the dance and not the follower. I've talked about putting pressure on the universe with your intention, with your vision, not from here, but from here. My yearning, my idea about what a perfect life could be. I begin to visualize that and flesh it out. Most people don't do that. I don't want to be poor anymore. I don't want to be alone anymore. That's not the way you ask the universe for what you want. You ask the universe for what you want by fleshing it out as an imagination function, as an emotion in it. This is what I yearn for. And the universe will give that to you. And this concept of synchronicity and coupled oscillators and sympathetic resonance and fractal patterns and all of the rest goes all the way down to the core of my DNA in the basic blueprint that consciousness used to design and build me and everything in me. My body, my tissues, my mind, my heart, my basic essential nature is in that blueprint. And when we align our blueprints together, we assemble a master jigsaw puzzle that requires various pieces. We start assembling all these little pieces together in a global mind link like we're doing. We're creating something that's bigger than all of us put together. A new personality begins to arise that has the ability of influencing things at a quantum field level. Here we go. Entanglement is an inevitable feature of reality. Here's the newest edict from the scientific community. You know, in a new study, physicists have mathematically proved that any theory that has a classical limit, meaning that it can be described by our observations of the classical world, must contain entanglement. Spooky action at a distance is now a rule. not a funny little finding here and there. It's a foundation principle of everything that exists. This is new, mind-blowing. Once again, it's right up there with the scientific community saying consciousness is a requirement for reality to exist. In that statement, you've thrown out all of Newtonian physics, the physics that we learn in school and we learn in college and we use in industry and we use in scientific endeavors. The apple falling on your head, and underlying that, an objective idea of the universe existing whether consciousness is here or not. Science believes that the universe has an objective reality, and quantum physics says no, it's all subjective, that consciousness itself is required to witness something for something to exist. Unless consciousness is there to witness it, it has a potential to exist, is in the twilight zone like Schrodinger's cat, living dead cat. It's a twilight zone state to exist until consciousness arrives in the scene. So if the tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound if nobody's there? If nobody's there, there's no forest. There's a potential to be a forest, a potential to be a planet with a forest, a potential to have a tree fall in that forest, but not until somebody's there to witness it. And this idea that all of us are strung up together, that we're all networked up together with every particle in the whole universe, and whatever's happening in the particles within us or within our own brain or in our own neurons or in our own DNA is entangled with every particle in the universe, and we're all dancing together. And this is now accepted nomenclature in the scientific community. Straight out of the Vedas. Physicists push the limit of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So in that principle, you can't measure a particle's speed and its position at the same time. But these guys are showing that when two particles have been purposely bound together in entanglement, it is possible to be certain of their position and their speed at the same time. The more significant thing here is that they've proven this in larger systems. In other words, the whole idea of what happens in quantum entanglement in a quantum realm with infinitesimally small particles is now being seen in the macro universe that we normally thought of as the Newtonian universe. And as I said once before, I had a whole live stream on something I call the wall. And the wall is the demarcation zone between Newtonian physics world here that we're familiar with, where we have gravity, time flows forward only, that you're you and I'm me, and I've got this body here and you've got that body there, and the world is made of an infinite number of finite things that have an objective of existence all of their own, whether consciousness is there or not. That world, and the quantum world, on the other hand, where none of those rules seem to work at all. Time flows forward and backward at the same time. Cats are living in dead cats and in some kind of transition state. The rules as we know them are weird. That you can see a particle, the act of observing changes the observed, and all of those things. Where those two worlds come together, where the wall is between those two worlds, is the periodic table, made up of all the atoms, which are the basic building blocks of the material world that we know of. And below the atomic atoms, below that level, the pattern of the atoms break apart into their component parts, protons, electrons, and neutrons. And now it's just letters and alphabet. Nothing's being spelled yet. And that's the demarcation zone where the quantum field rules appear to be the ones that rule everything. And this kind of thing here is breaking that wall, where if you can break that wall, you can see macro effects of spooky action at a distance in the macro world, in this world. We can see entanglement here. We can see coupled oscillator networks here. But entanglement at a great distance. That's what Cleve Baxter was doing. He was showing a entanglement in a macro world response, with the plants being sensitive to our intention. The same thing with pushing the button and stressing your cell, and you have a response 350 miles away outside of time. And then all I have to do is think about pushing that button. My intention of harming your cells causes you to have a response. This is entanglement of consciousness, entanglement of intention, entanglement of emotional states. And my intention to harm you is an emotional thing. My intention to heal you is an emotional thing. My intention to love you, it's to surround you with healing and love. This is the kind of stuff that we need to come. Once we enter into this mind link, we need to open this emotional state to heal ourselves and heal the world. Scientists use quantum entanglement to achieve instantaneous long-distance communication for the first time. Now, when it gets to a point where business models are being based on a quantum field effect in the macro world, now we know it's for real for sure. Scientists using quantum entanglement to achieve instantaneous long-distance communication for the first time. I mean, it's happening now. Unbelievable. That means whether it's cells in your body or atoms stretched across the far reaches of space, the phenomenon is fractal. It runs through dimension, it runs through size, it runs through distance, it runs through time, it runs through space. Look at this, spooky action at distance observed in 2 macro-scale diamonds. Where the atomic structure of 2 diamonds, they intentionally entangle them together and separate them by large distances, and can see that entanglement is taking place within a physical structure that you can observe in the macro world. Objects big enough for the eye to see have been placed in a weirdly connected quantum state. And it's everywhere. It's, as we're going to see here, it's being proven to be so in the master macro world, in the biggest structures in the whole universe that anyone is even able to measure. We see the same phenomenon. Size no longer makes a distance. Is the universe itself controlled by gigantic structures? We've talked about the cosmic web. The idea that celestial objects exist within utterly immense cosmic structures becoming inescapable. Solidity is a function of magnification. So is entanglement idea is the infinitely small versus the infinitely big. It goes on that scale as well. We know that everything we experience as solid is actually a structure of atoms packed closely enough so that our eyes, they appear to be a single solid thing. It's an illusion. Most of our body is space. Most of space is space. We know it's not space, it's a substance. But now we're starting to see the network connections between massive universal size structures with structures that appear very close to the networks we see and how our brain cells are wired together. Another fractal hologram. The cosmic web is what they're calling it, where these lines that we're seeing, these lines of galactic gas, form together and form whole galaxies of stars, and they migrate and move along these pathways, these highways in the heavens, just as ions move along pathways in neural connections in your brain, same way. Something like our own Milky Way is in some little arm of a larger massive structure of the cosmic web, where trillions and trillions of galaxies and nebula flow along these energy lines, these pathways. A mind-melting visualization of the universe's invisible forces, award-winning visualization, analyzes 240 million light years of space to peel back the layers of invisible webbing holding our universe together. And this is this whole giant chart, which I searched and searched and searched for the full-size chart, couldn't find it. But in this article, they showed blow-ups of various sections where they're looking at it from a different standpoint now. They're looking at it from the standpoint of the dark matter between the galaxies and the nebula that we normally see. And we begin to see these patterns emerge of dark matter, the spaces between the lines of the cosmic web. These are hundreds of thousands of light years involved, millions and billions of light years. The size dimensions are so stupendous that it's just impossible for the mind to wrap itself around. Most of the matter in the universe is dark. We only notice its effect through gravity. Here we see the distribution of dark matter as it would look if it emitted light. A rich system of structures appear. Massive clusters connected by long threads of matter form an interconnected network that permeates space. The nodes of this cosmic network are places where dark matter accumulates and gravities and whole galaxies start to form. And it looks just like the neural net in your brain. Functions pretty much the same way. And out in the farthest reaches of all of it, what are we finding? First evidence of cell membrane molecules in space. All cells on Earth are made of phospholipid membranes. Now astronomers have found the components, molecules in interstellar space just floating around. I had a whole episode on panspermia, on Pangaea, and how did life arrive on Earth on comets, and how did water get here through comets and asteroids. And now we're seeing that the basic building blocks of life and the building blocks now of DNA, phospholipids, is what DNA is made of. We're not talking about just the basic building blocks of building a cell. This is what's required to build the nucleus of the cell and the DNA inside that nucleus, which forms the basic blueprint of life itself, floating in space. Quantum entanglement of consciousness and space-time, a unified field of consciousness. Now we're talking about consciousness itself being an entangled form of all elements in the universe linked together at spooky action at a distance outside of time and space. That consciousness itself is that network, is that entangled network based on the underlying principles of coupled oscillator networks in action throughout the entire universe, scaled through size and scaled through speed and scaled through time. If quantum entanglement is weird, entangled time will really blow your mind. So not only can we entangle two particles at a distance and have them be synced up, but they can be synced up in the past and future, in all past events and all future events, because from a standpoint of quantum physics, the present is what exists, and it encompasses all past and all future events. Just like we were saying in Schrödinger's cat paradox, where if it's not a cat that's in a box that's either dead or alive, the next moment from now is the box that's closed, and consciousness is going to arrive on the scene. The lid's going to fly off the next moment, and what's in that box is an infinite field of all possibilities that could be. And what chooses which possibility is going to pop is my expectation that I believe this world looks like this. So therefore, that expectation gives special significance to one of those infinite possibilities, and that's just what the universe is always looking for as a path of least resistance, to pop that one into existence. So my expectation is why the universe continually makes this for me, because this is what I'm expecting it to look like. If I change my expectation, this all changes to anything I want. Me with no cancer, spontaneous remission, bang, it's gone. It's, it also means that I'm no longer trapped by my past. If I believe that all my present problems are because I was molested when I was 3, excuse me, but there was no 3. You were never 3. There was never a time in the past, just as there's never a time in the future. Only now is what happens. And what's happening right now is my expectation is I'm in a story where I was molested when I was 3. And the universe pops that up for me right now with all my memories and all the objects that will prove to me that I'm this old, and photographs of my mother and father and of me when I was 3, created right now to convince me I was molested when I was 3. So the question is, what perk am I getting out of creating this story from whole cloth? Inventing this story moment by moment by moment, and having the universe dish it up for me with a level of realism that is impossible to penetrate, because the pixels of this movie are quantum small. I can't penetrate it except in my consciousness itself. So I need to question, why do I need to be the person with that past? And this is what we're talking about with quantum entanglement. I'm entangled to an idea that appears to have happened in the past when it really did not. That my concept of the past is something I'm creating right now. Just like Schrodinger's cat paradox, when the cat's in the box with the hammer suspended above the cyanide bottle, and I shake the box and either it drops or not, and the cat is living or dead. I'm not going to know what happens until I open up the box. 5 minutes later, I take some notes, and 5 minutes later, I open up the box and take a look. There's a dead cat. That means that when I shook the box 5 minutes ago, the cat died, and that's not true. 5 minutes ago, when I shook the box, the cat entered into a twilight zone state of undetermined yet, until I look. 5 minutes later, I look and just created the past event when the cat died. I just created the past event. This is entanglement. The entanglement of me with the past event. I'm creating it in the future. Scientists now suggest various different realities can coexist. So this is getting more solidified and more solidified from just what used to be an idea. And the idea, once again, springs from Schrodinger's cat paradox, that from the standpoint of this perspective in science, 5 minutes later when I lift the lid and I take a look, from this standpoint here, the universe divides into 2 parallel universes, both of them rolling forward, one with the living cat, one with the dead cat. And that one difference between those two will eventually cascade effects that make these 2 universes diverge from each other. And if you give enough time, and we have an infinite amount of time, they won't even resemble each other anymore. It's the old concept of whether the butterfly's wing goes up or down. You have 2 universes where it goes up and the other one it goes down. That one minor action will change those universes eventually until they don't resemble each other anymore. Cascade of events, kicking a pebble down the hill and starting an avalanche of influences that make unimaginable levels of change and spread themselves out. And now we're getting down to what really was said in the Vedas. The universe is a machine that keeps learning. Well, it's an organic machine. You know, the idea that this is close to Rupert Sheldrake's idea that I've mentioned a few times before, the morphogenic field. He makes this statement exactly, by the way, that the rules of the universe that we currently are familiar with, both in the quantum field and the Newtonian field, are morphable, that they're evolving laws of the universe. They're not set in stone, that the universe itself is participating in adaptive evolution. And the rules of the universe are in flux and can shift and change. They can be anything you want them to be, because all of it is nothing more than a dream in the mind of God, right? So in the current dream, the universe is made of an infinite number of finite little parts that we can name. But if we decided that that's not the way the universe is, that it's made of magic, like our ancient prehistoric ancestors believed, perhaps the universe was made of magic and not smaller particles at that point in time. Perhaps it evolved as our minds evolved, our understanding evolved, and our belief system about what the universe looks like evolved to believe in science can explain everything and name everything and split things ever smaller until we find smaller and smaller pieces, because that's what we're looking for. So therefore the universe, we're expecting smaller pieces. So the universe dishes up as many smaller pieces as you would ever want to look for to prove the point that you believe. It's totally possible that the universe is so amorphous that the rules are whatever you decide they're going to be. It's not just you, it's the collective mind decides it's going to be. The grand coupled oscillator network of the universal mind, the collective unconscious mind that we all are part of, decides. But as we've said before, the universe itself is information about the relationships of the things in the universe. And as I said before, Terence Witt in The Undiscovered Universe, where this is what nothing looks like, where simple nothing on one side with an equal side with infinite complex nothing on the other side. And the complexity is the mathematical relationships between zero and itself, plus and minus and square roots and arrays and cosines and all the other kind of fancy schmancy math that you could ever imagine on Einstein's blackboard and more. The infinite number of relationships mathematically of nothing to itself is something. The relationships of math are something. And that's what this is. That's the something that pops out of nothing. The relationship of nothing to itself looks like this. This is the math relationships, all of their own, made flesh. Information has weight, it has mass. Basically, the entire universe is a universal mind processing information and learning how to build the universe to process information more efficiently and better and faster and deeper, to gain more and more deeper, pervasive, expansive understanding about what it means to be alive as the Godhood. That means that the more we expand our own consciousness and our own understanding, this is how the universe wakes up through us. And it's more efficient for us to align our minds together in massive coupled oscillator network mind links and form an array, because mathematically it's more efficient to do that. It's like the large array in New Mexico, all these 27 dishes that point towards the sky. They're all mathematically, scientifically, computerized, linked up together. So the 27 dishes actually form the biggest dish on Earth, because they're all functioning as little parts of a big dish. And that's how our brain works. All the neurons in the brain form network connections through the axons with as many other neurons as possible. And the more network connections that you have forming massive arrays, where the brain has more processing power now, the sum is bigger than the parts, the more connections between brain cells is a direct function of IQ. So that's Einstein's brain, 35% denser and heavier with axon connections between neurons, not more neurons. If we can form the same kind of thing by linking our brains together as a neuron with your neurons and an expanding number of people participating in this process, where we link you all together through science, brain entrainment, headphones, sound entrainment, forming a global mind link network connection, coupled oscillator network of brains, we're forming an array, and that array has more power. And the more arrays start to connect together, that's what's happening in my life now. Other arrays like ours are out there. And these arrays are all being drawn together to connect. I'm connecting with more and more and more of these arrays every month. It's blowing my mind. I mean, the doors are blowing right off their hinges with connections that are happening of like-minded groups like us. This is where it begins. One group forms a massive connection. It attracts other groups that are doing the same thing, and they all start to form themselves together and form a higher order network connection of connectors, forming a higher order level of array of consciousness that can accelerate the understanding and accelerate the consciousness expansion of the universe itself. In how it understands what it should all look like and how it should function the best. It could be that the world that we're in now, which is pretty screwed up, is exploring various possibilities of what works and what doesn't work. And now we know, well, this is a blind alley, this does not work. And if we don't do something to change this, it's just going to go right over the cliff. And this experiment will be over, and the whole thing will scrub and wipe the blackboard and begin again. You know, new phospholipid molecules will arrive from, you know, some comet or something, and life will start all over again and evolve in a completely different way and come up with a different solution that works. Unless we can bind ourselves together and pull ourselves out of the mess we are and say, okay, that's a blind alley, that doesn't work, let's do something else. Let's have a spontaneous remission and decide that we're not going to die this time. We're going to be the ones who figure it out and solve this problem. Solve the problem by mind linking ourselves together in a new format, a new evolutionary expansion of consciousness, of how the universe is assembling its brain cells together to solve the big problem of what's the best possible way the universe could be. The most efficient, the most happy, the most cohesive, the most symbiotic, the most labor-saving, the most work with the least amount of energy expended, the most at ease. That's what the universe is trying to accomplish through us, to give birth to a completely different idea. We don't have to be stuck with the idea that we're in right now. Your life doesn't have to look like it looks right now. If there's anything in your life that rubs you raw and does not serve to further, then you can change your mind. And you can throw that idea out and entertain the birth of a completely different idea that works better for you. It has to come from your heart. You have to have the courage to follow it wherever it takes you, probably outside of your comfort zone. Where you start aligning with everybody else. You know, this spooky action at a distance where every single thing is in its reversed image. Everything is in its mirror image with each other. Whatever this one does precisely, exactly tuned opposite. all the elemental forces boundless inward to the atom and outward to the whole. They all come home to nest inside your own consciousness, inside of you, in the deepest part of you, where you're connected to the whole, where you're entangled to everything. It's not out there. It's in you. It's in each of us. We are the core. We're the place where all the arrows are pointing. The universe is singling you out to do your part, and me and everybody else simultaneously. The job is to step forward, let it all go, declare the truth of what you're really all about, what you really believe in your soul of souls to be true about the nature of yourself, your reality, what serves you and what doesn't. You have the right to fire people out of your space, to rearrange your life in any way that you can conceive, so that the path becomes open and free and easy and clear, and all the people you need arrive by themselves. The only thing preventing them from doing that is the resistance from you. You're the one who has the doors closed. And at some point, the idea of opening yourself to the divinity of yourself and the universe, the grand plan of all plans, you're trying to uncover that inside yourself too. You're part of that plan, and step into it. Everything starts to change when that happens. The whole deck of cards is in the air, flying. Until you break out of your chrysalis and you fly off someplace into uncharted territories you never thought were possible, that were more glorious and more amazing and more mind-blowing than anything you've ever seen or conceived of. In the universe, it's in step with you, dancing with you, and making it happen, because you allowed yourself to open yourself to that possibility. And how you do that is through the power of numbers, the power of like-minded people who are also attempting to do that, who realize that if you form a team, if you form a tribe, if you form a network connection with like-minded people, there's power in numbers. And that's why we're here, and that's what we're going to do next here with our headphones. So relax, headphones, eyes closed, and here we go. here's where you can get that track. I will be here next Sunday. There are some workshops coming up, but we're not close enough into that to start warning you about the weekend. So I'll see you next week. Take care of yourself. Be happy and healthy and holy and all the rest of the good stuff.